How to grade Kumon reading. 3 general grading guidelines. There are 3 major guidelines you need to remember when grading reading homework for the Kumon Center. Number 1. Always use a red pen while grading. No other color pen or pencil will do. Always use a red pen like this. Step 2. Always use an answer booklet while you're grading. You must use this because you need to be consistent and accurate while grading reading homework. Step 3. Always grade backwards, starting from the B side of the page in a work booklet to the A side of the page. Since you have to record the scores on the A side of the page or the front, this will help the grading process move faster because you can work backward, put your scores on the front of the page, and then keep moving backward and recording your scores until you get to the very beginning of the booklet. Grading criterion. When a page has no errors on it, you simply draw a large round circle on the page. If both the A and the B sides are correct, draw circles on each page and circle the 100% score here at the top of the page. Do this for every page with no errors on both the B and the A sides.
Generally, when a student has a reading passage such as this one, the entire thing is automatically graded 100%. When you want to grade reading passages, you can do one of 2 things. You can either circle a giant red circle around that side of the page, just as you would for other passages graded 100%, or you can mark a great red slash through both sides of the page to alert the teacher that the student has read it.
In cases where the student makes an error, that error is marked off with a red X. Let's look at an example. On this page, the student has been given words to fill in the blanks: tower, gown, and how. On this side of the page, the student has filled in all of the words and all of the correct blanks. However, on this side of the page, instead of writing gown, the student has written dress. Since this is the wrong word, I will mark it off with an X. The X can be used not only when a student marks a completely wrong word, but also when the student writes an incomplete word. Let's take a look at this side of the page. Now, I am going to mark both number 2 and number 1 with X's, and this is why. The student has written 2 incomplete words. The words should be howl and owl. However, since the student forgot to put the last letter in this box, both words are incomplete. Thus, both words are wrong. And so, I mark them both with red X's. Usually, the red X costs them only 1 point. So, if the student, for both sides of the page, had included only 1 error, then I would have circled the 80% because that is 1 error. However, if the student had gotten more than 1 error, then I would have circled 69% because that marks 2 wrong answers. Or if they had gotten more than 2 wrong answers, I would still circle this because this means 2 or more problems got wrong. There are certain instances in grading when a problem can neither be marked off for a full wrong error with an X like this, or marked completely correct with a circle like this. In those instances, when a complete error cannot be marked on the problem, then a triangle is put up like this to mark a partial error, partial credit for the problem. This happens when a student has made an error in case of spelling, grammar, punctuation, or capitalization. It could also be used if the student uses a word that is incomplete or a phrase that is incomplete, or in the case of problems which have several blanks in them, which involve several answers, the student may have put some words in some of the blanks, but not words in other blanks. Or might have put several right words in some blanks, but a wrong word in another blank. I'm going to point out to you several instances of partial errors on this page. Let's look at a few examples. For example, in this blank, the student got almost the correct word right, but did not complete the word. He should have written constellations, but instead he wrote constellation. So I'm going to mark it off with a triangle. In this word, he got the right idea, but the word is spelled wrong. It says astronomy, so I'm going to mark that off as well. In this one, the student also did not complete the word universe. He is missing the E at the end, so I'm going to put a triangle there because he misspelled it. Another instance in which a student might get partial credit is when he fails to capitalize on a word. For example, in this word, the word probes should have a capital P in it, but he did not capitalize this word, so I'm going to mark off credit for it, just partial credit. Partial credit is also taken off when the grammar is wrong, or when the student is missing punctuation. Let's look at a few examples here. Now, in this sentence, the grammar is wrong. The sentence should read with the correct words, as there are no humans aboard. The student included all of the right words, but in the wrong order, so I'm going to mark off partial credit on it. With this one, the student did not use all of the words that he needed to use from the brackets. He only used some of the words, but since he did use some of the correct words, I'm only going to give him partial credit on it. Now, take a look at this last problem. We now have the technology. The student here used all of the correct punctuation except for the comma, which should have been at the end. Since he forgot that, but used all of the other correct words and punctuation, I'm only going to give him partial credit. Now, let's look at a case in which the student completed some of the right words in some of the blanks, but a wrong word in one of the blanks. In this sentence, the blanks are supposed to read we, them, and it. Now, the student filled in two of the blanks correctly. However, where he should have said them, he said it. Still, since he got some of the correct words in the blanks, I can only take off partial credit. Another instance in which partial credit will be given is when a student uses an incomplete phrase, but gets the general idea or the gist of it. Now, the correct answer to this problem, what would Joni have to do when she met them, would be she would have to play her instrument for them. Now, the student here has only written play her instrument. Even though she did not use all of the words that she needed to use, she did get the general idea. However, I can only give her partial credit on this because she did not use all of the words. The same thing goes for this. How did Joni feel? The correct answer from the answer book is Joni felt very nervous. However, the student wrote here that Joni was very nervous. Again, it's the correct idea, but the wording is a bit off. That's why I only can give her partial credit on it. If there is a question that contains more than one answer, and the blanks are not numbered, and there are multiple mistakes, then only one error should be taken off. It all depends on how many errors are made, whether you can take full credit off or only give them partial credit. With this problem, even though the student completed one of the blanks with the correct answer, she left the other blank without an answer. That way, I can only give them partial credit because it's only partly right. So, I would mark a triangle up where the 1 is at the beginning of the sentence. Let's let's say that there's more than one partial error in a problem. For example, take a look at the same problem that we saw before. Let's say that both of the blanks have partial errors in them. Now, instead of drawing one triangle by each of the blanks, instead what you would do would be to draw one triangle beside the problem and draw and write the number of partial errors inside of the triangle. If there are two partial errors in this problem, then write 2 in the triangle. However, no matter how many number of partial errors you get, you need to count the whole problem as just one partial error on it. Once a problem has been corrected, the X or the triangle, whichever marks the error, should be circled. Let's take a look at this problem. Now, the student who had left these two words incomplete before has completed them by writing L in, thus completing the words howl and owl. So, I will circle both X's. This will let both the student and the teacher know that the student has corrected the problem. If a question is still incorrect after a correction attempt, a second X or a triangle, depending on the type of error, should be placed beside the first to indicate to the student that they need to try again. Now, let me draw your attention to two examples. With this answer, the student crossed out the first word and wrote a completely wrong error. Now, since the problem only had partial credit taken away from it the first time, since the word is completely wrong the second time, you need to put an X beside that triangle. However, with this word, even though the student still has the right idea, their spelling is still wrong. So, you would put a second triangle beside the first triangle.
Grading partial errors is a bit trickier than grading full errors on a worksheet, because for the partial errors, you need to subtract 5 points from 100 and then circle the percentage that's closest to 95% in the numbers column. Let's say that the student made one partial error, so you would circle 90%, which is the number closest to 100 in the numbers column. But if that student had made 2 partial errors, then 2 partial errors would amount to 1 full error. Thus, if he made 2 partial errors, you would circle the 1 in the numbers column. In this case, that falls under 70%.
To indicate what corrections need to be made, you need to mark 3 things on the front of each workbook packet. 1. The time that the student took to complete the workbook. In this case, the student took 22 minutes to complete it, so I would write 22 in a circle on the front page. The second thing you need to mark is any comments that you have for the student, such as anything that they need to work on, anything that you thought they had problems with when you were going over their homework with them, anything like that. You just write it on the front of the workbook so that the teacher knows what to work with them on. The third thing that you need to mark on the front of each page is the score for all of the pages. Now let's look at this student. This student's name is Josh, and let's say that he completed 4 pages in a workbook. So, they go in this order backwards: 100%, 100%, 90%, and 69%. So, you would write in this order 6, 9, dash, dash at the top of the page. The 2 dashes mark the 100%, the 9 marks the 90%, and the 6 marks the 69%. Usually we abbreviate these numbers for each of the scores given on each of the pages, just so the student has a quicker idea of what to look for and which pages to fix when he goes through his work. Special circumstances, levels 7A through 3A. One of the special circumstances that we need to discuss today are the reading levels. Now, there are certain reading levels that you need to pay extra attention to with your students. One of the reading levels come between levels 3A and 7A. The grading scale for the reading program only begins at level 2A. Anything below that, from 3A to 7A, automatically gets graded 100% because students are just reading the source material out loud, or pointing to it, or tracing lines, etc. However, it's very important to study these students when they're doing their work. What you need to write down with these kind of workbooks are any comments that you have about problems that the student has with the work. Also, on the top of the page are a score for oral reading. Now, with these, you need to study whether the student says the letter or the word sounds consistently, frequently, or sometimes, and then circle the correct grade, such as number 1 if they read it consistently. See the Junior Kumon handbook as well as comments on the bottom of the first worksheet of each set for additional guidelines. If a student needs assistance with a certain exercise, such as this one, then put an asterisk or a slash next to the exercise. This will alert the teacher to the student's problem and will help them determine the student's strengths and weaknesses. As with levels 3A through 7A, a comment might also be helpful, written down here or up at the top near the number column. Special circumstances, levels B2 through E2.
Generally, between levels B2 and E2, special circumstances involve true or false questions. Let's take a look at an example. In this problem, the student has written false, false, true in the blanks, but instead the real answers are false, true, true. The student got the middle one wrong. Now, the thing that you must not do with this sort of problem is mark an X directly beside the wrong answer. This will tell the student directly what they did wrong, but you want them to figure that out on their own. So instead, you would mark an X or a triangle beside the number at the top of the problem. That way, the student can read through the passage again, examine each one of the answers they made before, and then fix them all with the correct answers in the right blanks the next time around.
Special circumstances, levels F1 through L. Another reading level to which you need to pay special attention are the upper level reading levels, anything from F and above, because these reading levels demand the students to read very long abstract passages and then answer questions based on those passages by using their own interpretation of the passages. You also need to read the passages that the student reads in order to examine whether their answer for the question was correct according to the passage or whether it wasn't. Of course, you also need to use the answer booklets, but when you do that, you need to really study the students' answers and compare them to the answers in the answer booklets. Sometimes the answers, although they don't use all of the words that are in the answer booklets, are generally right. So you can mark them okay if you think that they're okay, and you can circle them if you feel like they generally answer the question, even if they don't use the exact wording that is in the answer booklets.